Hello and welcome. This is the VCD RoundTable, episode 17, and today we are going to talk about VCD release 10.5.1. With that being said, I'm going to kick off the introduction round. My name is Yves, CEO and founder of the ComDivision Group, also VCDX and Cloud Architect since Cloud Director version 1.0. And yes, I did this since version 1.0. I was one of the first trainers in Europe for this, Matthias. I know
VCD
you will
architect
tell the
since
story.
1873.
Yes, back in the days where we brought the cloud in ships over the Atlantic Ocean. Handing over to Matthias to actually continue his joke there.
Yeah, so Cloud Architect at ComDivision, Cloud Architect since 1874. Maybe, I don't know. And handing over to Sascha.
Yeah, hi. My name is Sascha Schwunk, CRO and Cloud Architect at ComDivision. Yeah, welcome to the VCD Roundtable. Toby.
Hello, Tobias Paschek, Cloud Architect at ComDivision, mainly focusing on the whole networking portion.
Good. So for today, we have the plan to talk about the 10.5.1 release. Even though it's just officially a patch release, it has a lot of new features, enhancements, etc. The whoever actually does version numbering within the Cloud Director team at one point in time needs to get a badge for being very creative in not following any rules at all from the industry for changes, because there are actually quite a few new features and changes in there which are a bit bigger, which normally per definition should not actually make it into a patch release. But nevertheless, with that being said, I'm going to kick it off with one of the first things, which is that finally the certificate management is going to be moved into the UI. And it's not only that you can now pick and choose whether you want to do it on the command line or in the UI, it's actually only in the UI from on now on moving forward.
But that is a big implication, Yves, because you know that the awesome blog article everybody on this planet uses to change certificates and to mess around with the key store. You need to rewrite that article because it's useless.
The good part out of it, I know the service provider industry, and I know that there is still enough who are still running on 9 point something up until the point that they are going to be on 10.5.1. I can leave that article up and running for the next 2 or 3 years at least.
So you're suggesting or assuming that maybe if you just migrated to 10.4 maybe last week, or what's your assumption? Okay, just checking.
So with that being said, so that's one of the changes coming, but the majority of changes are actually more.
Wait, you're not done with certificates, my friend. You forgot to mention, because it's either UI, which implies the API, and that implies that the command line is gone. The cell management.
Yeah, but I said the command line is gone, my friend.
Okay.
So I said you don't have the choice between both anymore. You only can use the UI moving forward.
Sorry.
Nevertheless, moving along and actually getting forward to the next topic in this whole scenario. So, which is going to be more or less more, we can quickly talk about it, but we will actually do a second episode about that. That's going to be episode number 19, where we are going to talk about VCD tenancy alignment with NSX projects, because we need a bit more time for that. And we will do that live recording actually from our kickoff then in Fuerteventura. So that's going to be a fun story. We are going to decide whether we are going to do it from the rooftop or somewhere else. I need to figure out which microphones we can take for that.
We need bathing suits.
No, Matthias, no one wants to see you in a bathing suit. No one. Really, no one. So who can actually give at least a high-level overview of the VCD tenancy and NSX projects thingy and teaser people enough to follow us along for episode 19 then?
Yeah, a quick overview on that. Maybe some of you are already aware. that NSX has gone into the multi-tenancy space. So since version 4, we have now the possibility to create something in NSX which is called project. And now with the release of Cloud Director 10.5.1, we are able to introduce the projects of NSX into Cloud Director. But as you already mentioned, this has some implications, and this is the reason why we need to do a dedicated session on it.
Good. But that's not the only change around NSX and stuff like that. At least you all were very enthusiastic about changes in regards to the tier 0s and tier 1s. So Matthias, up to you.
So many changes. I think so because we already covered the IP spaces topic, which is still great from my perspective. On top of that, with 10.5.1, we have now the ability to configure NAT on a provider gateway. Doesn't sound that fancy in first place, but just think about it. What if a single tenant has multiple edge gateways, right? Having multiple edge gateways, configuring a single source NAT rule just to access internet, it's not configurable, or it has to be consumed as a managed service, configured by the provider in the upstream. But now we can just configure a single NAT rule for a few edge gateways, providing a centralized internet access point for a tenant. I know it's still only configurable in conjunction with IP spaces. So if you're not going to use IP spaces, you're still part of the manual configuration team, but yeah, it's a starting point. So I think that's an interesting change.
And we said you can also set the firewall rules.
Yeah, if you're okay, Sascha is from now on our security guy.
No, I think it's an important part, this combination with the NAT and the firewall rules.
And also the auto creation is something which is really an interesting feature, which makes the life of service providers maybe a little bit easier, that we now have also the capability of introducing some preset firewall rules and preset NAT rules that automatically, when we create a new tenant, basic internet access, for example, using DNS, using HTTP, using HTTPS, is there out of the box without any further manual integrations or manual interactions.
Yeah. But if we start talking security, Toby, one of your most favorite topics, web application firewalling.
Next to certificates?
No, we covered certificates. So you can now do it via the UI. So that still doesn't say that you need to prepare a proper certificate at the beginning. But let's move on to web application firewalling and NSX ALBs.
Yeah, that's also, which has been introduced by us, I think, since 4 or 5 episodes in the past. We have already talked about that web application firewalling from NSX ALB is already supported to use it inside vCD. But now with the release of 10.5.1, we are finally ready, or we can now really provide it as a self-service. So the customer can create their own web application firewall rule directly from the vCD UI without any further interaction from the service provider. Because in the past, only the service provider was capable to enable the feature and needs to be configuring the feature per tenant, and also from more or less with the ticket handling. And now the tenant can create his own web application firewall rules.
I think the only prerequisite is that the tenant is already on a premium service engine group.
Yeah, that's as always. We have the basic and the premium feature set in vCD for NSX ALB, and web application firewalling is clearly a premium feature.
Yeah, sounds good.
What's next on the bullet list?
Yeah, one interesting point I saw in the latest update, especially when you as a service provider working with or working in different organizations. So in the upper right corner, you you can see now the name of the organization you are working in. So that's very interesting. In the older days, you have every time to take a look at the URL and can see there the organization you are working in. And now it's really good to see it directly in the upper right corner.
Or if you just use the branding to have different colors for each tenant.
Yeah, maybe.
Matthias,
Today's
why
a
do I
fun
have the feeling
episode.
that if we were to give you the keys to the branding side, we would end up with a completely pink and purple Cloud Director?
Yeah, but at least you can choose between unicorns and naked cats.
I choose the unicorns. They are at least real animals.
But speaking about real animals. So what's your opinion about the new Cloud Director encryption management and the bring your own key system?
I think it's definitely a good step forward, so that you can finally do something also. And I think it's a good example. Let's take it a different approach. It's a good example to showcase that the VMware team is slowly and steadily trying to really make Cloud Director a central cloud platform for a service provider, because similar to services which you have at Azure or AWS or anything else, we slowly and steadily see that all these different services bubble up, either as an integration or as direct service. And bring your own key has always been a topic, especially when it comes to federal government or even state organizations. And in those specific key scenarios, this becomes a key topic. So the solution in the past had always been to have dedicated infrastructure for these customers, which was not very cost efficient. And so that actually becomes a much better approach towards that specific scenario. Talking about that extent as well, is it's not only that you have that part now. In the past, when you were building Cloud Director extensions, you also were forced to basically put the APIs and everything to the front end. And at the same point in time where they did this, there is now also, not necessarily with key management, but around that, the ability to basically proxy individual services from the outside to the backend of Cloud Director. So this, again, will make it easier for service providers to provide custom services as part of the Cloud Director offering and actually just pass through certain information. So we can clearly see that VMware is doing everything but not stopping moving Cloud Director forward. Like what some of the news out there sometimes seem to say is like Cloud Director is dead. It's like in the last, I'm not sure how many years of like how often I heard is like Cloud Director is dead. No, nothing is going to be on Cloud Director. It's like, doesn't look like it. I sometimes have the feeling it gets more features than many other products.
Working features or no? Whatever.
Only because you're always one or two versions behind doesn't necessarily mean that the features are not working.
Sascha, multiple identity providers. I think you have some interesting thoughts on this one.
Yes, so we are now able to add multiple identity providers in the different organizations. That brings us to the point if a customer, if a tenant want to change from identity provider A to identity provider B. So we are able to configure both ones and makes the change very smooth. So that looks very good. Now, that's one part here, yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm just checking.
Yeah, and also to add on here something, as we has already also mentioned in previous episodes, please be aware that the local users are more or less gone. They are still there, they are still supported, but this is a deprecated feature. So local users needs to be replaced via LDAP, via identity provider. So also here we can bring in a smooth migration from local users to any kind of identity provider.
And the migration of users is supported.
Yeah.
There's a process for it. That's a good
Yeah,
news.
there's a process for.
Yeah. But talking about migrations, Toby, you're the master of the migrations. Let's let's start with it, because in the past, when you migrated from an old infrastructure and you leveraged like the whole proxy ARP features to keep workloads alive and migrate from V to T,
Yeah.
you were stuck on the old or on the migration provider.
On the migration provider, to be honest, you was stuck because of the natural behavior of NSXT prior version 4 that you only can utilize, or that it was only possible to utilize the proxy ARP feature on an active standby tier 0, which means also my after migration, still my T0 was active standby. The only solution in the past was, okay, introduce a new tier 0 gateway and in a manual process, change the uplink tier 1, go into the database, rewrite some fancy stuff in the database. It was always funny work for Yves, the master of the database. And
I never made changes to the database. That is just a pure rumor. I have never, ever made any changes to the database.
Okay, it was
potentially ran over the keyboard and some useful commands came out of it, but I did not actually by intent change anything in the database.
But now with the release of 10.5.1, we have now finally got the possibility to change in a shared tier 0 behavior. We can now change the parent tier 0 from a tier 1 perspective. So we are now able really to go as a provider into the UI, select our tier 1 gateway we would like to change from tier 0 number 1 to tier 0 number 2, and can do it from a provider perspective, and also from a tenant perspective, if we are talking about a dedicated tier 0 or a dedicated tier 0 VRF, also the tenant is capable of changing the tier 0 gateway from a tier 1 perspective, which is a huge improvement. And finally solve the issue that migrated customers or migrated cloud providers can now also switch from active standby to active tier 0.
Makes sense. So some reconfiguration needs to be done on the hood. But that also changed a bit with 10.5.1, especially all the BGP configurations, but that will be covered in episode 19, as you've already mentioned in the beginning.
Yeah. One other note is before you upgrade to Cloud Director 10.5.1, because it's just a side note, which might not be very clear for some people, there it says where it says Angular version support notice, where they restrict the number of supported Angular versions. The challenge with this is if the developer of any kind of plugin, being it a backup vendor or anything else, uses one of the affected Angular versions, then most likely that plugin is not going to work anymore. I'm sure this is not going to hit many providers very hard because they always have a test environment which is exactly built the same way, including all plugins, as the production environment, and they would never, ever install something without checking things like this. But just in case, if by any chance this would ever happen, that would be similar to that you would have not migrated yet from V to T. Just in case, be aware there is something going to happen if you do any of that. And just as a pre-notice, VMware already announced that they are going to restrict the amount of supported versions even further down in the next version. So if you're not hit by this one, you most likely are by the next one if your plugin vendor is not state-of-the-art. So just to keep that in mind and actually keep that managed.
But it's not happening to anyone because everyone reads the release notes.
Yeah, the challenge with that is if you go into the release notes of, let's say, a backup vendor's plugin, I'm not sure if they actually point out which Angular version they have used to compile the plugin. And this is where it's basically impossible for the service provider to know that, except in asking the plugin vendor. because there is, I at least can't come up with an easy way on how you would be able to figure that one out up front. Good. I think that already covers most of the 10.5.1 scenario so far.
The basic stuff.
Basic stuff.
Postponed to episode 19.
Yeah. One last thing we could add is the HTTP transparent proxy feature, which has now also been utilized or introduced with 10.5.1, where I get the capability that I can utilize my Cloud Director to proxy requests to other APIs, which is now in a transparent mode. But also here, please be aware that this feature is maybe not working from an internet perspective at the moment, only from an internal network perspective. But it is the capability to extend your Cloud Director environment to other API endpoints.
Do we have covered the encryption keys?
Yes.
Yes, similar to the HTTP proxy, which I covered also before already. But nevertheless, it's always good if we cover that again.
Happy New Year.
The year is pretty new. On the other side, it's like sometimes we had, at least at peak, we had eight viewers in parallel. So if you are actually watching this live, feel free to drop us any questions in so that we can come up with answers for that. But in the meantime, Toby, the next episode is going to be a VCF overview high level. What can we expect in the next episode from that perspective? Because you are going to prepare that one a bit. And I think we are going to record that next week, I think.
Next week, yeah. Yeah, on one hand, maybe we should start from the basic. So on one hand, what is VCF? Because I think maybe some of our service providers are not aware of VCF at the moment, because in the past, it was not so 100% clear that VCF will be the main topic in the future. So maybe some service providers hasn't invest or spent the time into VCF. So I think we will have a look what is VCF from a starting perspective. Then also talking about multi-tenancy and VCF. So what can we do in VCF? What can we need still to be done in Cloud Director, where we can mix those capabilities together. Also from projects from the past, we would like to cover the whole NSX world, because NSX is some main feature of VCF, but maybe not always fitting for service providers with the deployment of some of the automated mechanism of VCF. So we need to talk about that one. Yeah, and then also figure out how we can already integrate VCF with Cloud Director from an automated deployment perspective. Well, what is already possible, what is not possible, where are the pitfalls, and where are some huge advantages?
I know what VCF is. It's an acronym.
Is it really? Are you sure?
No.
What does it stand for? And you can't use the words VMware, Cloud, or Foundation.
No, but being honest, I'm really looking forward to the session next week talking about VCF.
We are going to announce the recording time as soon as we have it, because currently, from what I see, it might be overlapping with a live session, which Sascha and I are going to be involved with on Monday. But we will publish that somewhere this week, so that gives more people to join in live into the session and actually follow us along and throw questions our way, because that's our plan moving forward with the vCD RoundTable, to not only have the podcast and videocast format, but also have live sessions running so that you can actually join us and hang around with us. And we even have the capability, if you want to, we could even get you live broadcasted into the show if you're interested.
Really?
Really fancy. So with that being said, I think it's time for the closing round and the closing terms and closing words. And then I'm going to kick this one over firstly and foremostly to Sascha today.
Okay, yeah. What should I say? Interesting time currently with the Broadcom VMware talks. Have talks with many service providers who don't know what is the future for them. And so if you have questions, feel free to contact us and keep in contact with us. And yeah, we will support you in the future. Handing over to Toby.
Yeah, also thanks for joining. Thanks for reaching out to us with questions, and see you in the next episode. Matthias.
Yeah, really looking forward to next 2 episodes. Firstly about VCF, secondly about the NSX1, live from Fuerte. Yeah, I think today we just covered a few new features, what's new, what might ease the migration process or the post-migration steps after V2T. But the next 2 episodes will be really cool. Yves, famous last words?
Famous last words. Yes, as said, thank you all for listening in. Thank you all for staying with us. As you have seen, we are going to be a bit more current now again with versions. We are going to record the next one already next week. We will keep you posted on when the live session is going to happen. If you want to meet us live and in person, Sascha and I are going to be in the Pittsburgh area on Thursday and Friday in the US. And then we are going to head down to Miami for a customer kickoff, and then we are heading over to our own kickoff. But if you see us on any of the LinkedIn medias, etc., where we are, and if you are in the area, always feel free to ping us. Maybe we can set up some lunch, dinner, or something else in between. With that being said, we will keep you all posted. You can find everything around the VCD Roundtable on www.vcdroundtable.com and also on all the usual podcast and video cast platform for subscriptions. With that being said, thank you all for listening and watching, and have a great day and a great week.
Bye.
Bye.